Delighted to welcome you to this next event in the seminar series for the Livery Climate Action Group. I'm your host for this evening. I'm Avril MacDonald. I'm the immediate past master fueler. So I'd like to start with my introduction, because in fact we have breaking news. We have a message from Antarctica, came in only 2 days ago. This is Jo Cole. She was a friend of my daughter's when they were in primary school, and she is now working in British Antarctic Survey. And this is a photo she sent of herself in Antarctica on Friday. She was going to send us a video, but unfortunately there isn't enough bandwidth, so we have to have a photo, and I have to be Jo's voice because she sent us her message. And this is what Jo has to say. The effects of climate change are being felt far and wide. Even here in Antarctica, a mainly uninhabited area, the effects of climate change are seen. The Antarctic Peninsula has seen an almost 3-degree temperature increase in the last 60 years, which is almost 3 times the global average. A warming climate in Antarctica has impact on the retreat of glaciers and on the collapse of ice shelves. Antarctica restricts human impacts on the environment through the Antarctica Treaty, and its agreements and treaties like this I think we need more of to protect our planet and move forward in a responsible way. Effective change can come from individuals, governments, and industries. Industry can have a big impact and responsibility on our environment, as can be seen from the Montreal Protocol that has been effective in the ban of CFC gases that were depleting the ozone layer. This agreement between governments had a large effect on industries and has had large success with the direct impact shown in the reduction of the Antarctic ozone hole after its introduction. Governments, individuals, and industries have a responsibility for our environment, atmosphere, and oceans to enable us all to thrive for years to come. I would love to see more of these collective initiatives, protocols, and treaties between nations and industries in the future, instigating real change. So there you are. You've now received from Antarctica an introductory message for this fantastic event, and we will have more ideas from more young people for the rest of the evening. It's now my pleasure to hand over to Dr. Kevin Stenson, Chief Executive of Arkwright Trust and Small Peace Trust, who will introduce the videos and the young people.
So thank you, Avril. Thank you for that very kind introduction. As Avril said, my name is Dr. Kevin Stenson, and I have the privilege of being the Chief Executive of the Small Peace Trust. I actually want to start by thanking our friends at the Livery Climate Action Group for enabling the Trust to actually be involved in this Young Voices on Climate Change event, and actually to say thank you more widely for the Livery Company's fantastic support of the Small Peace Trust, and in particular our Arkwright Engineering Scholarship Programme, and you'll be hearing from a number of our scholars shortly. And supporting Livery companies include the worshipful company of engineers, fuelers, the founders, which I'm proud to say is my own company, and merchant tailors, to name but a few. The Small Peace Trust is an education charity that exists to increase the number and diversity of young people that choose engineering pathways that make engineering careers possible. And the reason that this is our purpose is that, as we all know, there is a shortage of young people that choose engineering pathways, which contributes to the shortage of engineers in the UK. And the risk is that we won't have enough engineers to actually make a full contribution to addressing global challenges such as addressing climate change. And that's why we're all here this evening, because we all recognise the importance of addressing climate change and that we all have a role to play in this. And it's great as ever to see the Livery movement actively involved in this. And I remember sitting with Alderman and Sheriff Alison Gowman at a Fuelers event last summer when she first told me about the Livery Climate Action Group. And my first question to Alison was, how can the Trust support this given our role with young people and education? And at the Trust, we exist to inspire, inform, and influence young people aged 8 to 18 through interactive activities specifically designed to help them see how STEM subjects make a positive contribution towards society, but more importantly, that it actually affords them potentially brilliant careers through which they can actually make a real difference to the world. And ultimately, technology will be the enabler for companies and governments to meet their net zero commitments, and therefore enabling young people to make this connection between STEM subjects, technology, and climate change, and the role that they can play in changing the world for the benefit of future generations is a real focus of our work. And how does the Small Peace Trust do this? Well, we have three main programs. We deliver challenge days in schools for 11 to 14-year-olds that are themed around things like renewable energy. And again, we're indebted to livery companies like the Fuelers, who have sponsored a number of these for us over the years. We also run week-long residential courses at universities themed around things like clean energy and battery technology. And finally, we have our Arkwright Engineering Scholarship Program, which is a 2-year scholarship for A-level students as they prepare to make decisions at 18. And our scholars, as you will hear, are very aware of climate change. And actually, our scholars in our scholar surveys, they actually highlight climate change as the single biggest challenge facing engineering. And this is why in 2021, we actually ran our first ever Bright Sparks Future of Clean Energy online conference exclusively for Arkwright Engineering Scholars. And we're actually indebted to the Fuelers for actually making this first conference actually possible. And it's now been viewed some 1,000 times. And it's because of this focus that our brilliant scholars have committed to supporting this event this evening. And you're about to hear from Ashwin, Ella, Madeline, Rohan, and Ujay. And I know that you will be inspired, informed, and influenced by what they are about to say. Thank you.
Okay, so you are Ashwin with Queen Elizabeth School in Barnet, awarded an Arkwright Engineering Scholarship in 2021. We are here today to hear your views on the current climate issues and climate change. So I will hand over to you to put your point across.
Currently, there are a majority of businesses that are prioritizing profit over the planet. And the reason for this relies on two main aspects. One is consumer behavior, and one is government policy. However, I think as both consumers and citizens, we can make a great impact towards reducing the climate change and the effects of industry behavior towards our environment. Currently, one issue is planned obsolescence, for example, and this involves designers and industries creating products which are meant to be thrown away. And the reason for this all has to do with mass consumerism, as we live in ever-growing trends. For example, with fast fashion, as one case, we can see ourselves using more goods, buying more goods, but eventually throwing away a lot more goods. And for example, in the fast fashion case, we've seen an increase in microplastics as one example throughout our oceans. However, it's vital that these industries change their behavior and design products that are sustainable and whilst also being usable. And as I alluded to earlier, we as consumers have a power to change this. Industries respond to how we behave. As our shopping habits change, we send a message to these industry giants that sustainability is key. And we can do this by simply buying more sustainable alternatives on the market. And we can drive the change that's needed to bring about the eco-friendly market. However, there's more to it. We can also act as citizens by lobbying for greater government policy. Currently, for example, the government has had a range of policy failures in, for example, the Green Homes Grant, which had cost over £1.5 billion, which was shut down recently in March. And as citizens, we need to sort of push our ideas forward to our local MPs and push our ideas and help discuss with the community the biggest issues that we are currently facing related to the environment, and making sure the policy is accessible and also is highly effective. One example is carbon taxes, which the International Monetary Fund called one of the single most effective tools towards reducing climate change. Currently in the UK, carbon taxes have not been as equally considered across multiple industries, and the effectiveness of government policy has really mitigated the effects of carbon tax. And it's vital that, as one example, that we push forward to this. And with mounting government policy failures, we need to discuss with our MPs our own views to help make these new policies accessible, effective, and ultimately help push forward a new green revolution.
That's brilliant, thank you. So you talked about the need for change there, and the consumers' activity and buying behaviours are really key to this. That's really good to know. So let's turn to another topic now, and we'll look at homes. So homes are one of those things that people will always need. Ever-growing population, ever-growing reliance on fossil fuels and such like. So given the need for homes and the impact that will have on green spaces around the world, do you see any logical ways or logical solutions to that problem?
So the issue with one of the issues with our ever-growing population is this need for homes. And currently there's a range of sustainable technology that's being implemented into new builds, and for example, solar panels. And it's vital that the government helps push forward the ideas of using the sustainable technology within a range of builds, but also in designing solutions that can be retrofitted. However, there is an issue with new builds, particularly when implementing new sustainable technology such as solar panels, is that it drives the price up of new builds and also has issues related to gentrification, especially in regions that are not as socially or economically developed, for example. And one way the government can help target this, and we as citizens can push forward, is, for example, in government subsidies, where new builds that incorporate sustainable technology could have a reduced price in either the cost of development, but also for the cost of living in those homes, for example. And this incentivizes consumers to go and buy these houses, but also incentivizes new building companies to incorporate sustainable technology in their housing developments.
Wonderful. That's brilliant. Thank you. Just before we wrap up then, Ashwin, this is your platform to make your voice heard. Do you want to leave the audience with any final thoughts on climate change?
I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're living right now, what you're doing right now. It's vital that you take forward these ideas of eco-friendliness and sustainability in every aspect of your life and push forward for clearer and more sustainable policies with the government, whether it's speaking to your MPs or being one of the first in your families to incorporate more sustainable life. It's vital that we act now for a greener tomorrow.
Wonderful. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. You are Ella Tingley of Varndine College, awarded your scholarship in 2021, here to talk about climate change, to get your perspective on that area. So I want to ask you a couple of questions today, Ella. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to do this interview with us. I want to have a look at education and climate change, if I may, in the first instance. So thinking about the education community, obviously schools and colleges, what can they do to increase both awareness and action in young people when it comes to thinking about climate change?
Yeah, I think when it comes to climate change, and young people especially, I think we already know quite a lot about climate change just through the media and everything. But obviously some mandatory climate change related sort of activities are important, although not necessarily like as a subject. I think it should be like woven in to other subjects, as sort of tutor times, that kind of thing. But I think primarily education should be involved in like empowering young people to take action rather than just informing them. Because yeah, as I said, a lot of the information we already know. That's not something that we need to know more of per se. But yeah, so I think sort of mandatory activities, I think being given the opportunity to go outside of school and college to make a difference, I think that's really important, because young people, we do care about climate change. I think everyone I know has an opinion. And for us, there are very real consequences of climate change for like our whole lives. This is something that we will be facing for decades and decades. But yeah, I think we need to be given the opportunities and the platforms to make a difference. We're all being told we have to, but we don't really know how to go about that. So I think that is just empowering young people is really important.
So from what you're saying, there's a real awareness amongst your peer group, and it's that really getting out and doing those activities that bring us to the forefront. Mandatory activities are a very interesting concept. I don't know how much luck we would have with making people do it, but if it's part of the education system, then I totally see your point there. I suppose one of the other areas that we need to look at is the government. So obviously the government are key drivers in policy development, obviously green energy and climate change. What should they be doing to support both the education system and the world or the population at large in terms of driving climate change awareness forwards?
Yeah, I think the government, obviously the UK government, are doing quite a lot. They've made a lot of pledges. They were one of the first governments, like first sort of major economies to make 2050 net zero like law. And they are obviously making only electric cars from 2030. I think that would be really good. And there is some sort of financial help for people wanting to make changes, but I think they do need to be doing more. There needs to be more investments now rather than in 20 years' time. I think at that point it's a bit too late. I think especially in sort of public transport and sort of that sort of infrastructure, because like I said, a lot of people, we know about the issues. People know that they need to not be using cars so much, but there just isn't a better alternative at the moment. I think public transport can be quite unreliable, costly, and all these things. So no one is choosing to use public transport because it's not a viable option for what they want to do. So I think that needs a lot more investment immediately to get that sort of, as well as sort of electric cars. They need more incentive to do it now. We need more sort of public charging points, which is important because, I mean, going on sort of long journeys, I think that is the main issue with electric cars at the moment. People want to get an electric car, but if they're driving a long way, they won't have enough electrics in it, and they don't know if they can charge on the way. So that's one of the main benefits of having like a petrol or diesel car, which it's an issue for electric cars. I think we need more investment in that, so that people can choose the more sustainable option. Because yeah, I think things like restrictions, making things mandatory, it is a bit iffy. I don't think anyone really wants to have that sort of curtailed, but yeah, I think we need more encouragement. We need better incentives to choose the sustainable options. For example, like vegan and vegetarian food, we need more options for that. We need them to be cheaper. And yeah, the same with sort of transport. We need these options to be available. We need it to be there so that people can choose it themselves rather than being forced to do it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's brilliant, and yeah, really pleased to see you touch on the food issue there. The government are key drivers of policy, as I say. You're right; they have been doing a lot. A lot of what you talked about focuses on infrastructure and the need for that to be there, and the options available to people. And absolutely agree with you on those points. Just thinking about so climate change as a whole and the impact on really what needs to be done, regardless of the area that it needs to be done in. Are there any final thoughts that you want to leave the audience with today, just to get them thinking about climate change?
Yeah, I think it's really important with climate change to consider everyone, the sort of the intersectionality of climate change, and that it affects everyone, primarily the people who haven't caused it. Like, if it's your responsibility to clean up your mess, because otherwise someone else will have to deal with the issues. So I think it's really important for everyone to see what they're doing and what they can do to change that, especially in all areas of life, really. There isn't a particular area that's more important than others. I think everyone needs to be thinking of what they're doing everywhere and how that affects not just themselves but other people, because it's a really important part of climate change is sort of social justice. And where do we get in that from? Because you might feel like you're not being affected that much, but someone else is definitely paying the price.
Absolutely, and we see those reports from third world countries in terms of the accumulation of plastic and bits and pieces from the Western world. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, Ella, for putting your points across this afternoon.
Thank you.
So you are Ujay of Ripon Grammar School, an Arkwright Engineering Scholar awarded in 2021. Here to give your thoughts and views on climate change. I understand that you've already prepared a piece for that, so if you'd like to deliver that for us.
Thank you very much. Climate change is a really important issue and it affects everybody, individually and in the community. There are many points to touch base on about how we can solve and mitigate the problems of climate change. One of those points I would like to present to you is about car ownership. Many people travel to and from work or school or to their groceries on a daily basis using cars. Cars pollute a huge amount of pollution per person, whereas a person taking a public transport the average amount of pollution produced is far less. There are many health benefits to be had from this, because many people have passed away because of air pollution, and it is important that everyone should see how we can be at the best we can to be good at. There are many solutions. For example, cycling is one important aspect. I used to cycle to and from school roughly 10 miles a day. It has helped my parents a lot because it has cut down the need for fuel economy, and on top of that, it has benefited me physiologically. I would encourage many people who live nearby their schools or businesses or institutions to take whatever mode of public transport they can as best as possible. This is because this will save you a lot of money in the long run. It will help you with your finances, as well as helping the environment by not producing as much emissions as cars do.
Okay, that's brilliant. So you've obviously given car ownership a lot of thought. Quite an emotive subject. It's quite difficult to get people to give up cars. They see it as a necessity rather than a luxury. So you talk about the benefits of not having as many cars on the road. How do you see us being able to reduce the number of cars on the road? Do you think that should be driven by the public? Should it be driven by policymakers? Who's responsible here?
I would encourage the policymakers as well as employers and school owners to encourage their employees or students to reduce the need for driving the cars to their workplace. It would be of most use because many people can get to work on time, productivity can increase as well, and we can overall have a better community because there's the need for essential road users such as ambulances, fire engines and police. They can get to the places they need to without the problems of having to go through the congested traffic jams.
Wonderful, that's brilliant, thank you. So let's move on to another point. So you are within the education system yourself, obviously thinking about going on to further education. What do you think that the education system should be doing about climate change in order to help us tackle it? Should they be compulsory teaching of climate change related subjects such as GCSE? Is there any other thoughts that you've had?
I would encourage the school and education boards to always consider climate change. They should always teach it to their students because it is affecting us all. For example, many of the students may go on to become construction workers. For example, it is important that they can ask their employers or their designers to take climate change into account. For example, to make more sturdier and more better quality houses for people to live in. For example, down in Wales, where it does flood very regularly, many homes and properties are devastated badly because they are subjected to the increasing power of climate change from the winds and the rain. If people are not willing to move away from their homes and their homes are constantly needing to be rebuilt, I would ask for designers to help build their homes, for instances, a little differently, so people can still stay in their homes and also mitigate the impact of climate change. And I would imagine this would benefit a huge amount of people.
Yes, most definitely from the after effects of climate change. Okay, that's absolutely brilliant, Ujay. Thank you very much for that. So this is your platform to make your voice heard. So do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with today?
Of course. There are many things to say, but if I were to condense it down, I would ask the general public to consider, is your journey necessary to use the cars? Could you use any other modes of transport to still achieve the same outcome as you want? I also encourage the policymakers to hear keenly to their communities and their people they represent, to listen out as best as they can to all the people so they can make policy making more impactful about protecting the environment, protecting the people, as well as ensuring people can live happier lives, because time is of the essence. We shouldn't miss the chance. Everyone is needed, and we can all work together to mitigate the impact of climate change.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Ujay. That's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. So you are Madeline Warburton of Ashby School, awarded an Arkwright Engineering Scholarship in 2021. We're here today, Madeline, to talk about climate change and the impact that that has on the world at large. I want to talk to you today about the world of fashion. It's one of those areas that absolutely everybody needs, clothing, but it's seen as an issue in terms of the impact on the climate. So what are the issues within fashion that you see?
So I see the main issue is fast fashion, and fashion itself is the third largest manufacturing industry, and it produces more produce to climate change than aviation and shipping combined, and that itself is a problem. But like studies by the UN Environment have found that 8% of carbon emissions are produced by this industry. And it's not just carbon emissions, but water pollution as well. With creating one t-shirt, it takes 2,700 litres of water, and the majority of this water isn't used in a sustainable way. It's not recycled, it's just going straight into open water sources like lakes, rivers and oceans, and that's a problem as well. The fact that 20 to 30% of microplastics in the oceans is from this industry is also appalling, and the fact that 3 in 5 of the items produced through this carbon emitting and water polluting process end up in a landfill is just wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's some food for thought there, isn't it? I had no idea that 8% of the CO2 emissions were coming straight from that industry. And yeah, very damning, the 20 to 30% of microplastics. You've obviously done your research here. So fast fashion is a relatively new phenomenon, sort of within the last sort of 30, 40 years. It's one of those things that rears its head from time to time. And it is a move away from the make, do, amend attitude that we had perhaps in the 40s and 50s. So with all these issues in place, what are the solutions that you as a young person see to this problem?
So for starters, we need to change our mindset as the consumer. We need to view clothing as an investment, not just a one-off purchase for something that you're wearing once or twice and then throwing away. If we can, we need to be buying from charity shops or mending our own broken clothes, or maybe if the clothing is completely wrecked and it's unwearable, using it as rags for washing and cleaning, because it's just a way of reusing these bits that wouldn't be used otherwise. But then also, as a consumer, we need to be nagging these big businesses, be asking things like, how is this being produced? Was the energy in the water used renewable or not? Were these renewable sources of energy like wind or solar? Was the water used in a sustainable way to prevent microplastics going into the oceans and things like that? And then it's not just the actual clothing itself, but is the packaging sustainable, and is it limited as much as possible? So is there more plastic going into the packaging that's used? And we also need to be asking things like how many air miles has this product taken to get here where I'm buying it? Because if it's gone from Bangladesh to Mexico and back again, and over again, that's a bit wrong. The fact that it's just going over and over again, polluting the air with all these air miles. And then, so we also need to be asking as well how the waste is being recycled, and how the designers themselves are seeing new ways to take old clothes to make new ones, using more ergonomic patterns that take old clothes and t-shirts and things like that, making them into new things. So maybe making an old t-shirt into a baby grow, something that it will still use a lot of the fabric, and if a lot of the fabric is unusable, it will be able to just reduce the amount that's going to landfill that little bit more. So as a customer, we need to be holding these businesses accountable for what they are doing to produce waste to the environment. And then it's like the final thing, we've got to be disposing properly. We need to be recycling our fabrics as much as possible, and donating them where possible. And that's what we need to be doing to change our mindsets and the businesses' mindsets.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things there, isn't there, in terms of changing the mindset of the consumer, changing the way that the companies drive this forward, less about profits, more about impact on the environment, and also the ever-present need to take these items that are already in circulation and reusing them, recycling them, upcycling them, all that kind of thing. So that's brilliant. Thank you, Madeline. So, given that this is your stage, you've got the ear of everybody here today. What final thoughts would you like to leave people with today?
I think the main thought is that we as a consumer need to be seen that we have the power to change these businesses' ways of producing clothes. If our customer needs change, these big businesses have to change with us. Otherwise, they're not going to make a profit from us. So we need to be changing our outlook as the little guys to affect these big businesses. But it's not just our fault as a consumer for this. The businesses have to be held accountable for what they are doing by us. It's us and the businesses that have to be like rallying off each other to make sure that there isn't as much waste and pollution and emissions coming from this industry. We need to be working together, not just the businesses providing clothes and we buying them because we've got a hole in our top that can't be mended with a bit of sewing, things like that. We need to be changing our outlook completely, because it's not right that we've got this attitude that, oh, it's only slightly broken, let's throw it away, buy another one.
Absolutely. There's a mindset shift, and there's that need for potentially sacrifice as well going forward, both from a consumer perspective and a manufacturer's perspective. That's absolutely brilliant, Madeline. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to sit through this interview with us, and for delivering your thoughts on climate change. Really appreciate it. You are Rohan from St Olaf's School, a 2021 Arkwright Engineering Scholar. We're looking for your view, specifically your view on climate change. So if you'd just like to talk me through your points, Rohan, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks. So I think I, like so many other people in my generation, have grown up kind of seeing climate change in the news and seeing its effects in other places in the world, but also here in the UK. And we're starting to see now the effects of climate change take hold in a way that maybe previous generations haven't. And I think that reality of the impact of climate change and how it's actually going to change our lives and affect them means that so many people my age, so many young people are kind of particularly concerned about the issue of climate change. And so I think that's why when you've seen movements like the school strikes and Fridays for Future, there have been such a powerful statement of young people's hopes about how we can tackle the climate crisis, but also their fears about the kind of catastrophic effects that might end up happening if we don't take the action that we need to. And I think it's interesting to think about what kind of action we ought to take. And so whether it's right for example, the government to do things like rationing meat consumption or rationing car ownership. And I personally don't think that those kind of actions are what we do want to take, because although the climate change crisis is an emergency, government needs to make sure that everyone is engaged in tackling it and everyone is able to feel like they benefit from tackling it, because actually solving climate change and solving the climate emergency is actually going to help benefit people in ways. We will have less air pollution, we have more green spaces around, increased biodiversity. And so approaching it just from the angle of banning things and telling people they're not allowed to go on holiday, I think is a shame, because it misses out on the huge opportunities that solving global warming can offer us.
Excellent, wonderful. And so thinking about the proposed changes, you've talked about what wouldn't be a good idea in terms of rationing meat and that sort of thing. Have you got any ideas in terms of how you would like to see this progress from a personal standpoint?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one thing that needs to be encouraged is people to take individual action. So whether that's thinking about the number of holidays we go on, obviously here in the UK, a lot of people are fortunate enough to be able to go abroad on holidays, are fortunate enough to be able to drive around a lot. So there's the individual action, but individual actions can only do so much. And I think it's often trying to place the burden on people to solve the climate crisis, individual citizens, is just government's way of avoiding taking any action themselves. And so I think it's vital that government makes big, bold decisions. So whether that is, for example, putting in place a carbon tax, that's something that I'd be in favour of, because it means that the people who can afford to go on, multiple holidays a year are paying for the cost that they're imposing on everyone else by jetting off abroad. So there's that. But also there's just government investment in new technologies like battery technology is something I'm really interested in, because it means that when we're building more wind farms, we don't then also have to have gas power stations in case the wind doesn't blow. There are things like renewable technologies in vehicles, batteries, yes, but also hydrogen-powered vehicles. And I think hydrogen's especially exciting when it comes to aviation, because although we can, and we've seen through the pandemic that we don't need to fly as much, there are still going to be people who want to visit their family abroad and so on. And so looking at hydrogen fuel cells in planes and these kind of engineering solutions are also a really hopeful way that we can keep living our lives to the high level of quality of life that we've become used to, but without having so much of an environmental impact. But obviously we do need to make some sacrifices and start to think about whether we can continue to go on with such a high carbon lifestyle that we've become used to.
That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much. You've obviously given this a lot of thought. That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Great.